Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I made a pair of pyjamas for just £2. First, to make my pyjamas, I needed a pattern. And to get my pattern, I looked on the internet to see if I could find a free pattern. I found several actually, but the one I used was from a company called The Assembly Line. I downloaded the free pattern. You then need to piece it all together, stick it together, cut it out, but that's okay. I'll use this pattern over and over again, so I'm not worried by that. Then to get the fabric, I went to a charity shop, bought a large duvet cover, cut all the seams off the side, and then I was left with 2 pieces of fabric. I decided to make the top out of the front of the duvet cover and the shorts out of the back of the duvet cover. Obviously I had to use thread and some elastic. It wasn't much thread, so that wouldn't have cost a lot, but the elastic I believe cost me just over £1. But I paid £2 for the fabric and I still have half of the fabric left, so I would still say that I managed to get my pair of pyjamas for £2. Right, they were fairly easy to make actually. They're quite an easy pattern to follow, and I'm going to talk you through all the instructions, but I'm just going to point out about the hems. On the hems, let me show you the shorts. It shows you to overlock the edges and then just stitch. So you can see the overlocking on the inside. The seam is not turned over again. So when I made the top, I turned the seams under twice on the hem and the sleeves. I just think it's a better finish. And I also did that because I realized that not everybody, especially a beginner, not every beginner is going to have an overlocker. So I wanted to show you a different way of doing it if you don't have an overlocker. So there we are. There's my pyjamas. Let's get started and I'll show you how to make them. If you print off your pattern pieces on A4 paper, there are 32 pieces of paper to piece together. Hello Millie. The instructions show you the order they should be pieced together and it's quite simple to do. Millie's come to help me. Millie's my little Cavapoo dog. I join mine together with sellotape. Each sheet of paper has a number on it, so it's very easy to work out where each piece goes. And they also have little diamonds on them and you have to match the diamonds up. When you've taped your pattern pieces together, you can then cut them out. You need to decide which size you want to make and then cut out according to the size that you would like. They start from extra small and go up to 3 extra larges, I think, and you just find the line that you need to cut on and cut out the pattern piece to the size that you require. Then lay your pattern pieces on your fabric as per the instructions and then cut out, remembering to mark all the notches as you're cutting out. The fabric I'm using for the top is a different pattern to the shorts. This is how the duvet was. It has a check on one side and these circles on the other. So I chose to use the check for the shorts and these circles for the top. You also need to cut out some interfacing for your neck facing front and neck facing back, plus 2 strips 2.5 centimetre wide and 18 centimetres long. These are for your pockets. Fuse the interfacing to your neck facing front and back on the wrong side of the fabric. Then, following the manufacturer's instructions, add your 2 strips of interfacing to the wrong side of the fabric to the pocket openings on the front, back and both sides. These will be marked by notches and it needs to go in between the notches. To make the pyjama top, follow the notches to fold and iron the hemlines 3.5 centimetres towards the wrong side of the fabric on both the front and the back bodice, at the bottom and the sleeve openings. Now the pattern doesn't say to do this, but I've also turned under on the raw edge an extra 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimetre, so it's kind of folded over twice. You've got 3.5 centimetres plus a small little turn up of 1/4 inch or half centimetre, and then once you've ironed them and folded them down, you unfold them for now. And for the hem I did exactly the same. I turned under the 3.5 centimetres, but then I also turned under 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimetre along the raw edge. Next, with right sides together, place the front bodice on top of the back bodice, matching up the shoulder seams, and pin or clip in place. I'm using clips for this. You do the same to both shoulders. Then sew together, taking a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then overlock. Then iron the shoulder seams towards the back. Then it does tell you to overlock the edges of the sleeve openings, but we're not going to do that because we turned under by an extra 1/2 centimetre or 1/4 inch. Place the front neck facing on the back neck facing with right sides facing and pin together at the shoulders. Then sew together, taking a 1 cm seam allowance, and press open the seams. Then overlock around the outer edge of the facings. If you don't have an overlocker, you can do a zigzag stitch. Place the neck facing on the bodice with right sides facing, matching up the shoulder seams. Then pin or clip in place. Then sew, taking a 0.5, that's half a centimetre seam allowance all the way around. Then cut the corners of the seam allowance where the shoulder and the facing meet the neck. Then it says to turn the neck facing around and iron, making sure that the neck seam is just barely noticeable on the side of the facing and facing over, and you just want to be able to see a little bit of the outer fabric on the inside, and then pin the facing in place. Then stitch 0.5 of a centimetre, half a centimetre away from the edge of the overlocking to make a visible 3 cm top stitch around the neck. Then place the front bodice on top of the back bodice with right sides facing and pin or clip the sides together. Then sew down each side, taking a 1 cm seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish and removing your clips as you go along. Now cut a few 0.7 cm notches in the curve of the sleeve side seams, but make sure that you don't cut into the seam itself. Don't cut your sewing, otherwise the seam will come undone. Overlock the side seams while stretching the notches a little. I forgot to film this, so I'm just showing you how I did it and where I did it. You just stretch out the seam so it's straight rather than curved whilst you overlock, and you do the same for both sides. Then iron the side seams, pressing the seam allowance to the back. Then it tells you to overlock the bottom of the hem, but we're not going to do that because when we turned over our, I think it was 3.5 centimetre hem, we also turned under a 1/4 of an inch of the top, so we won't need to overlock. Pin both of your sleeve hems and your hem at the bottom in place like this. So pin in place, ready for sewing. It does tell you to sew 0.5 centimetres away from the overlocking, but as we've not overlocked, you just need to sew about 3 millimetres away from the edge. So sew all the way around, removing the pins as you go along, and remember to back tack at the start and the finish. Now on to the shorts. The pattern instruction says to next turn up the hems on the legs and the waist. It says to turn up 3.5 centimetres on the legs and 3.8 centimetres on the waist, and this is on all 4 pattern pieces for the shorts. The next step is to join your front trouser pieces together and your back trouser pieces together. So with right sides facing, place your front trouser pieces together, matching the notches, and pin in place, and then do exactly the same with the back 2 pieces. Then sew front and back together, back tacking at the start and the finish, taking a 1 centimetre seam allowance and removing the pins as you go along. Sorry, this is all in centimetres. This pattern makes an assumption that you have an overlocker. So if you do have an overlocker, that's great. When you've done this, sewn the seams, you need to overlock. If you don't have an overlocker, then you can either cut with your pinking shears or do a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Either way will be absolutely fine. The next step is to add the pocket bags. So with right sides facing, pin the pocket bags and do the same for all 4 of the shorts pieces to the side of the shorts, matching up the notches, and then pin in place. I should point out that I didn't actually follow the instructions, and I put the pocket bags on before I sewed the front and back pieces together, but this is the order that the pattern says to do it in. Then sew all the pockets in place, taking just under 1 centimetre seam allowance, starting at the top and sewing down to the bottom notch, back tacking at the start and the finish and removing any pins as you go along. Then press all the seams towards the pocket bag. Then make a 2 mm understitching on the pocket bags for both the fronts and the backs. So you're stitching on the pocket bag side 2 mm away from the seam on all of the pockets. Next, place the front pieces on top of the back pieces with right sides together. Then matching up the notches at the sides, pin or clip in place. Pin all the way down each side and also around the pocket bags. Sew down both sides, taking a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So 1 centimetre past the start of the pocket and finish with your needle down. Lift your foot, turn around, and then carry on sewing around the pocket until the pocket joins the shorts again. And at this point you again finish with your needle down, lift your presser foot, turn around, lower your presser foot and carry on sewing all the way to the end, and then repeat the same process on the other side. If you have an overlocker, overlock both of the side seams. If not, you can just zigzag. The next step is to fold the seam allowance and the pocket bags forwards and iron on the seam. Then make a bar tack on each side of the front pocket opening on the shorts front pieces. To make a bar tack, you do 3 stitches forward, 3 stitches backwards, and then you repeat this 4 times. This is to strengthen the pocket openings. Often you do a zigzag stitch, but something as light as a pair of pyjamas, just stitching backwards and forwards a few times is quite enough. Next, the pattern tells you to overlock the leg openings and the waist. If you don't have an overlocker, you could zigzag or do as I did for the top and turn under an extra 1/2 centimetre. So you turn under the 3.5 centimetres and then you turn under an extra 1/2 centimetre, so you don't need to do the overlocking. Then it says to place the inner leg of the front piece face to face with the back piece and stitch a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and again finish with overlocking, or you could do a zigzag stitch. Then with a hot iron, press this seam towards the back of the shorts. Next, refold the already prepared hemlines and press if you need to, and then pin in place. Do the same for both the legs and the waist. The pattern says to stitch 1/2 centimetre from the edge of the overlock, so there will be a 3 centimetres top stitch along the hemlines of both of the legs. So we're just doing the legs at the moment. I'm using a magnetic seam guide. The waistband is slightly different, so you need to top stitch 3 millimeters away from the top edge all the way around the top edge. Then you make another stitch around the waist 0.5 centimeters, 1/2 centimeter away from the overlock edge, as you did with the legs, but you need to start just a little to the side of the back seam. So we're starting at the back because that's where we're going to close it once we've added the elastic. So you start at the back, away a couple of inches away from the centre. So all the way round, well, not all the way round because you're going to leave that gap. So you're going to leave an opening at the back of the shorts, and it needs to be approximately 3 centimeters long. The pattern then tells you to cut your elastic to the required length. And it does give some suggested lengths, plus a 1 centimetre seam allowance. I did a little bit more than a 1 centimetre seam allowance because I liked a big overlap just to make sure that it doesn't come undone. Anyway, once I've cut my elastic, I threaded it through the casing. Next, it tells you to place the edges of the elastic overlapping 1 centimetre and stitch in place. As I said, I've done a much bigger overlap than 1 centimetre and I'm stitching it on the machine, but you can hand sew if you prefer. Then close the centre back opening by stitching between the 3 centimetre opening. Then it states to fixate the elastic, so make sure your elastic and your gathers are all evenly distributed, and then you're going to sew down each of the side seams, or the 2 side seams, sorry, and the front and back seam. That's to hold the elastic in place. And that's your pyjamas finished. Well done. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, could you please like and subscribe? Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.